Cageside with John Morgan.
And welcome back to a post-UFC 305 edition of Cageside with John Morgan. I'm your host, Eric McMahon. DDP reigns supreme in Perth, Australia. Let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it because I'm telling you, it was a banger card. It was a banger fight. And I'm going to tag in my tag team partner. You can follow him on X, John Morgan _MMA. His name is John Morgan. What's up, pal?
I'm good, man. And you nailed it, right? I mean, first of all, the card as a whole has 2 Fight of the Year contenders on it. So, I mean, anytime you have 2 fights that great in there, it's going to be a great night. But this main event, my goodness, man, we talked about all the drama, all the intrigue, the stylistic matchups to go along with all the drama outside of it. And then for it to play out like it did, I mean, delivered in all aspects.
I dropped my mic as you were there because I was so excited to jump in and just say, listen, I don't get nervous watching fights. When that fight was about to start, I don't know. I'm like, dude, I have these nerves right now because the tension was palpable, right? It was just, It radiated. I wasn't in the building, but it radiated through my television. And it was just, those are the fights you love watching.
100%. It's, you know, there's no place I'd rather be on Saturday night. Now, let me say, some of my colleagues seeing them making the journey home from Perth, Australia, and they're still on their way back, haven't even got home. Makes me glad I wasn't in the building. But from the energy I can even feel on TV, I felt the same way, man. Again, this was one of those fights that had it all. The rivalry was real, right? The tension was real. The stylistic matchup was incredible. The things that each of these guys could do. It was a meaningful fight. And again, it just played out exactly the way that we thought it might. The ebbs and the flows and the tension and the drama and the moments of positivity on both sides. One guy's winning, the other guy's winning. Oh, my gosh, Israel Adesanya, Dricus Du Plessis. Incredible. What a way to cap off the card.
Let's rewind to 1 week ago when we broke this fight down. And I kind of put out the disclaimer like saying, hey, we're pretty good at doing this. Right?
Humbly speaking, of course.
But I think when you have fighters, then you have pundits, right? And then I think you have people like me or you who are pundits, but mega fans also.
Right.
And I think we need to, because I saw a lot of fighters come out and say like, hey, Izzy took the break. He's looking great. He's this, that, and the other. It's Izzy's fight. He's going to get his title back and then he's going to go and do whatever. Beat Sean Strickland again. And then, maybe a super fight after that and then call it a career. Then you had a lot of pundits who were saying, almost the same thing to a degree. And then you have guys that were like fans. I'm going to put me and you into that category that we were saying, like, hold on here. Just hold on. I see Izzy's path to victory, but it's not as clear cut as Dricus's path to victory.
That's right.
A zebra doesn't change its stripes in 8 months.
That's right. And it was like, and I think what concerned both of us is that it was like, listen, Izzy has to fight perfect over the course of 25 minutes, right? I mean, he has to nail every minute of 25 minutes or he's in danger of losing this fight. And now we both also said he's the kind of guy that can do it. Like he's that technically good. So I don't think either one of us completely discounted Israel Adesanya because he is that guy that can be that good, but he had to fight flawlessly. And in moments, he did fight flawlessly. Like I thought he looked this to me, as I saw Israel Adesanya, was not a depleted this was a guy that was dialed in, that was having a great fight, that was executing on all the things he needed to do in moments. But we didn't want to discount Dricus Du Plessis, and that's ultimately why we decided that was probably the guy that had the better chances to win the fight because he had more paths to victory, and it didn't require being perfect for 25 solid minutes.
One thing that I think we nailed it on the head of how this fight was going to go. We pretty much outlined it specifically, and it played out to a T. What I didn't take into account was he really attacking the body the way he did?
Yes.
That's the one thing, and I think that labored Dricus to a degree. And then we'll get into, kind of round by round here in 1 second. But that's the first time I really saw anybody kind of attack Dricus's body, which I think now, for the Stricklands of the world or the just any of these top contenders coming out with that high guard, I mean, a playbook was laid down Sunday morning.
Yeah, I completely agree. That was one thing I didn't account for either, and he had such success with it. And it was clearly part of the game plan. And it's smart, right? Because as you said, and the commentators notated, and it is a strength of Du Plessis is how responsible he is with his high guard, right? I mean, he is keeping himself protected at all times. But you see, even though he looks labored and tired at times, he'll keep that there. So it makes it tough to land that knockout blow. With those bodies, you can certainly rip into. And man, the guy did look like he was slowing down, but he always looks like he's slowing down. He always looks like he's fatigued, and then he continues to move forward. It was a fun fight. And real quick before you go round by round, I do want to say it was funny because you texted me right before the thing was about to start, right? And you're like, still going DDP? And I remember I hit you back, and I'm like, I am. I'm like, Adesanya's scaring me a little bit, man. That whole fight week, watching them all played out, how dialed in, how focused he was.
He was
the rest
more shredded too.
Oh my God, he looked physically as good as he ever has, right? And just, I was worried the emotions would get to be too much for him because this was a very emotionally charged fight, but it didn't seem to be. It wasn't. It was just driving him. It was burning him at his core. It was giving him fuel for motivation and for focus. But again, I kept leaning on the fact that, man, I think this Adesanya is going to be a good Adesanya, and it was. It's just that he has to be perfect for 25 minutes, and he wasn't. He made minor mistakes, but those minor mistakes were enough for Du Plessis to capitalize.
Agreed. Right. And, to further that point, I just think in a whole, when Dricus said this fight was ultimately won on the feet, I tend to agree with him, right? Because Izzy was obviously the cleaner striker.
Yes.
But even when Dricus's punches, they don't look like they land clean. I can tell you they're landing thuddingly.
Right. And those are the ones that are scariest, right? I mean, for you and I that have been cage side, inside the cage, right? I mean, it's those ones that have that low thudding resonance.
Yeah, when they don't make noise, those are the worst.
Those are the ones that slap, and those are the ones. It's funny because those are the ones that get the biggest reaction from the crowd because they hear that audible. And again, if you audibly, it does sound incredible, but those are the ones that hurt the least. It's those the ones like you said you don't hear, or you just hear that thud that really cause pain, and he just seems to hit that hard.
So we had texted back and forth a few times during that fight just because it's like my wife went to bed. I didn't have anybody over, and I'm like, I need somebody to talk to about this. Like, my stress level was at like a 9, right?
Yeah.
But so round number 1, extremely close, feeling out round. Okay. But this is where, if we're getting into criteria, it was a hard round to score, but that power, that difference that you could see, in my opinion, and the more willingness, it looked like they were taking turns moving forward, right?
Yes.
And I firmly believe that, and I think it played out round by round by round, that Dricus's game plan was, I'm going to let Izzy come forward. I'm going to have a high guard, and then I'm going to blitz, put him on the back foot. And then once I got him on the back foot, I'm going to blitz again. And then I'm not going to get reckless like I can with other people. So then I'm going to high guard again, and I'm going to rinse and repeat it, which then let Izzy come forward. So, when DC and Cruz are saying, hey, whoever goes first is having the better success, I firmly believe Dricus was letting Izzy come forward because he understood off the bad beat that Alex Pereira had that I don't want to do that all the time.
Yeah, he kind of hinted at that afterwards, right? That he was staying in communication with his corner, that they were going to tell him, this is the time to move forward, right? It's almost like he knew I can't move forward all the time. And I think some of that is respect to Adesanya's offense, which is incredible. He's a polished striker. I think some of it may be a little nod to the fact the fatigue issue. He says it's not one, but he does look labored at times. So maybe it's like, hey, we know we can't go hard for 25, but we know we can go hard for 12 and a half. And if we make sure it's the last 2.5 of every round, which is the part that's sticking in the head of the judges, whether it's supposed to or not, that's probably a wise game plan. It's like they really, really thought through this on multiple levels and played it to a T. That first round was tough to score. I'll be honest. I'm looking at the official UFC stats. They did have Dricus Du Plessis winning on significant strikes, 22-16 in that opening round. The judges were split on it. I actually did lean Adesanya watching it live. I've gone back and watched it back, and I see the case that you're making for Du Plessis as well. Charlie Keech was the only judge that gave Du Plessis that opening round. Ben Cartledge, David Letby actually gave Adesanya round 1. I gave it round 1 as well, but so close that I really, I see the case the other way. Watching it live, I went Adesanya, but boy, after that first 5 minutes, you knew we had a phenomenal fight on our hands, right?
Yeah, and I gave DDP that first round just for the simple fact is actually you hit it on the head, and it's going to play. I'm going to talk about that second half of every round, right? Because that's key in this.
Yeah.
And that second half of every round, Dricus landed the cleaner blows in round number 1, the more thudding blows, and the one that was a little more reactionary to Izzy in round number 1. So for that reason, I gave it to DDP. Now, again, extremely close round.
Yes.
And I don't think a lot of people have put much stock into that left kick of Dricus. I think it was giving Izzy a lot of problems to the leg and to the body. And Izzy naturally changes stance a lot. But the minute he got hit on that side, he would switch back right away. So I don't believe it gave him that free-flowing nature as much as he really want. And I saw that early in round 1. Dricus would come up, and as Izzy's throwing punches, which we're seeing Izzy throwing punches, he's throwing that low kick at the same time when that foot is planted. I don't think people, for the herky-jerkiness and of DDP, I don't think people are giving him as much credit as a smart, calculated fighter as he is.
I think you're so spot on with that, man. That's the take that I have. I mean, I hear all I heard all week long and all the build up to this is how awkward DDP is. And it's true, right? But it's almost like people are saying that it's not purposeful. And it is. That's what I think is fun to watch. I mean, you talk about the free stance switching from Adesanya. Man, DDP has that same free stance switching as well, which made this so fun to play out. Because a lot of times, I mean, these are two guys at the absolute highest level. You see guys that switch stances, but they're really only switching stances just to give a look so they can immediately switch back into their favorite stance and throw what they want to throw. These two guys aren't that, right? I mean, they're purposeful with what they do. And I think people aren't giving Du Plessis enough credit for what he's doing because of the fact that maybe it's not quite as smooth and stylish. It's effective. It's more of a marauding type style. Maybe it is a little bit awkward if you want the way he moves, but it's an effective way of attacking. It's not just random. Much in the same way that, like, different comparison, but like Dominic Cruz with all his wild movements early in his career, people are like, the hell's the guy doing out there? I mean, why does he move like that? And you're like, oh no, he's really doing something. It's not just random. So I think it's taking some time for people to really appreciate what he's doing out there.
Yeah, but in those wild exchanges, or not wild, but in those exchanges where Izzy's throwing at him and throwing hard and effective, that guard is so high and so tight. And yeah, Izzy may have hit him 3 times on the arms and the shoulders, maybe glanced off his head, but DDP lands a thudding leg kick in it, or a thudding body kick in it, and it goes unmentioned a lot of times because we see the pretty visual of the punches coming up here, not what's happening below the surface.
So true. So true. Like you said, they may not quite be as, stylistically beautiful, but that doesn't make them any less effective.
Now let's move to round number 2, because we talked about this last week, and you posed a question. Do you think it's going to be do you think Dricus is going to rely on grappling a lot? And I said, yeah, I do, because I think he can. And I said this before, and Dricus kept on saying he was the king of getting up and the king of all this. But a lot of times the rounds that he lost, like I said, in the future, he was unable to get up. Right. And kickboxers are notorious for hard to take down. So I think we are painting Izzy with that massive kickboxing brush? And why are they hard to keep down? Because they're not going to try and do jiu-jitsu at all.
That's right. They don't settle,
That's why
right?
they're
We
hard
see
to
that.
keep down.
It's so true, right? Because we see that sometimes. And it's such a thing you have to get out of your head. It's like, don't accept guard. Don't take the position. Don't pull that. You know you don't want to be there. So don't ever even do that. Immediately switch to a hip. And you're right, man. And Adesanya is very good at doing that.
But in round number 2, yeah, he got up, but he got up after, let's call it, a minute on the ground just to get taken back down again. And if you're getting held down on the ground, in my opinion, it's nearly the same thing as being pinned against the fence. I put them almost in the same category, because the only defense Izzy had for that was throwing in that round number 2 specifically, was throwing a Kimura attempt that I knew he was never going to go for.
Right. Yeah, you're using it to set up a transition, using it to set up an escape, right? And to your point, looking at the stats again, Dricus Du Plessis credited with 3 minutes and 28 seconds of control time in that second round. I mean, that is a massive portion of the round.
Yeah, and he landed some good shots in that second round. I think it was a clear round for DDP. People go crazy because when he got up the time, and listening to the broadcast sometimes drives me crazy. Okay? Because the minute Izzy got up, he got up in a way that Dricus was naturally his back against the fence.
Right.
And the crowd, and then, DC is like, all right, now Izzy felt it. Now he's going to let go because he ain't scared. And Dricus doesn't want to be here. It's like, all Dricus did is explode forward and, 10 seconds later, and now he's back to where he wants to be. It wasn't Izzy forcing that. He high guarded, and because he high guarded, which he always does, I think DC took it as a fact of, oh, he doesn't want to be here. Now he's worried. He's dead tired because he used so much thing. And I'm like, no, it was just the natural positioning in which it got up at, in my opinion.
I would agree with that. And the other thing that I saw in some of those early scrambles is I thought, and I don't want to say, I would say I thought Adesanya got a little bit fortunate, because I thought that he got out of some scrambles without actually defending the choke and without actually controlling the hands as he got back up. And it kind of, to be honest, planted a seed with what we would see, play out in the 4th round, and that you got into this position, and yes, you're wily and you're turning and you're moving, but the basics of let me get 2-on-1 and ensure that I can't get in any trouble in this situation wasn't happening. You were able to get free in a scramble, and I thought, ooh, dodged a little bit of a bullet right there.
Yeah, Izzy threw a punch in that second round as like DDP was, I don't know if it wasn't a knockdown, and they're like, oh, and then DDP got the takedown of it by going with that low single and almost like just pulled him down to the ground. Came up, jumped on his back. That ends round number 2. I didn't see much in round 2 that made me say, okay, this is Izzy moving forward. But the commentary team sure as hell did. I don't know what. Am I wrong?
No, I thought that was a clear DDP round, and I thought it showed that, okay, here are the moments. Yes, Adesanya survived some bad spots, but he still got in those bad spots. I thought the opening 2 rounds were rounds that both showed us that these two fighters each had a path to victory. You know what I mean? And so
yeah. So let's recap this now. You had Izzy round number 1.
Yep.
I had DDP round number 1. We both had DDP round number 2. Okay.
Yep.
Now let's go into round number 3, because here's really where in my opinion, the fight gets interesting.
Yes.
A lot was said on this broadcast about the tide is turning. DDP looks massively fatigued. Have we heard that one before? Right?
Yes, we have.
And now Izzy's dictating this fight. I think that was true for the first 3 minutes of that round. I don't think we are giving Dricus Du Plessis the credit he deserves for the intelligent fighter that he is.
Agreed. And I think the team itself, for the game plans they're putting together, and his ability to execute and stay focused on it, man. And it's funny. Again, I like going back to the stats. I never like going back to the stats to determine who won a round. You shouldn't do that, right? It's not about numbers, but to use them to enforce points that you're trying to make, I think, are incredible. And in that round, Dricus Du Plessis, the exhausted, the fatigued, the worn out Dricus Du Plessis throws 75 significant strikes in that round. He had thrown 77 in rounds 1 and 2 combined. So that is by far the highest output that he has had into the fight.
I didn't even know that.
Isn't that great? But that just stands behind. That's data to prove to your point that there's this narrative being told that this guy's exhausted, this guy is done, the fight's taken over, and yet that's his highest output to the point, which is, I think when people question him afterwards, hey, you were looking gassed. He's like, if that's gassed, call me gassed all day, baby, because I was in there. And man, it just continued to be a fantastic fight.
You know how, like, you say some people have like resting bitch face?
Yeah.
You heard that? I think DDP has like a resting exhausted face.
It's so funny.
And I'm going to say this, right? Because the way somebody sweats and the way their hair, like his hair, like goes straight down, right?
Yeah.
Which means he has like, I guess, finer hair. That's how my hair does. It's like somebody's like, oh, you looked exhausted after that jiu-jitsu match. I'm like, no, I was all right. But it's like my face gets red and my hair falls like that. I'm like, that's just the way I sweat and I have finer hair. Like, I don't know, thinner hair, whatever. I think Dricus is a victim of that to a degree in a weird way.
No, I agree, because he's shown it over and over at this point, right? That he may look like he's fatigued, he may look like he's slowing down, and yet he's not. He's getting finishes over and over and over and over again. He's performing late in rounds, late in fights. So I completely agree with you. It's a visual thing that isn't necessarily telling. And again, I just pointed to the numbers. If you don't believe what we're saying, just look at the numbers themselves. Third round was his highest output of the fight to that point. In fact, greater than round 1 and 2 combined.
Where I was surprised in that third round is that's when Izzy really attacked the body. And I think there was 2 shots in that in that third round that I do believe Dricus did not like at all.
Yes.
There was one that was in the middle of the cage. He feinted up high and boom, I think he hit a right hook to the body. Then about probably 20, 30 seconds later, when he had Dricus moving back, the high guard, he came in with two body shots. He pitter-pattered up top, 2 hard body shots, and he didn't like that. But the reaction from him was to move forward. And here's what I'll say. He was getting tired. He wasn't exhausted. He wasn't gassed. He was getting tired because he had been fighting for 13 minutes at that point, right? But when he moved forward, of course the punches are going to be a little more labored. Of course they're not going to be as crisp or as straight. That's just a byproduct of fighting for 15 minutes at that point. But what he did is he says, okay, I'm going to put my foot on the gas pedal now. And in my opinion, I rewatched it yesterday afternoon because I wanted to make sure I knew what I was talking about. He won that last 2 minutes of that third round.
100%. 100%. He was saving the best for last in each one of those frames. He was no more fatigued than you would expect anybody to fighting at a world championship fight in the UFC at that level against somebody like Adesanya, who you have to be aware of at all times, right? There is no relaxing. Like you do have to keep the hands up. You do have to keep the tension high, the mental focus high. There is no, we talk about active rest spots, right? I mean, I don't know that there are a lot of active rest spots against Israel Adesanya unless you're able to establish and get on top of him and pin him down, which we've already told you is very, very difficult to do because he's not accepting of even that position. So there's not a lot of active rest opportunities against him. So I do believe he was tiring, but no more than anybody else. I think the fatigue question is starting to get to be a little bit of a tired story, man. And the guy continues to prove that he can perform. So winning the last 2 minutes, did you have DDP up 3-0 going into the fourth?
No, I think DDP used round 3 as an active rest round. I really do. Right. Yep. And so I gave Izzy round number 3. Okay. I think
I did too.
DDP closed that distance in the last couple rounds, but still I think Izzy clearly won the round. But this is what I was impressed with. And I was impressed in the moment. I remember making a mental note about saying, even when Dricus is tired, a lot of things suffer, whether you're exhausted or not, or just fatigued. Both fighters were fatigued, right? but Dricus didn't lose discipline in anything he did in that fatiguing. And that is so rare, because you later in those fights is when the openings and the gap starts getting wider because one person isn't as disciplined. And when Dricus turned that tide in that last couple minutes, I saw Dricus's discipline still there. And I honestly saw Izzy's discipline dissipating just a tad.
That's such an excellent point. And I think that is such a great way to frame it about what makes DDP so effective, right? Like, we have this thing, we're talking about the discussion of his energy level and his fatigue. Well, does energy level and fatigue really matter if your habits don't change? If your movements don't change? You know what I mean? If you're able to stay it's why you push so hard in training, right? But it's just human nature. It's hard to stay that responsible, to say that, exactly the same way and doing the same things. Everybody does it a little bit differently. But if you're exhausted and you can still execute in the exact same manner, then does it actually matter? I don't think it does. I think that's what makes him so effective. I think you hit it spot on. That's such a great explanation for what makes him so good.
So we both give Izzy round number 3, albeit we both agree that DDP probably won that last 2 minutes. That sets the stage for the closing round, which was round 4. We're going into championship rounds. So you literally had Izzy up 2 rounds to 1. I had DDP up 2 rounds to 1. I think I saw a journalist post the cards. Did 2 of the 3 judges have DDP up at that point? Is that correct?
They did, but I wanted to go over them real quickly to show you how great this fight was, because even the 2 judges that had DDP up 2-1 did not agree on the rounds. Charlie Keach gave DDP 1 and 2. David Letheby gave DDP 2 and 3. So Charlie Keach had the scorecard exactly like you did, DDP 1 and 2. Ben Cartledge had exactly the way I did, Adesanya 1 and 3. And then you had David Letheby out there with, I think, a completely defensible scorecard in many ways, and giving DDP 2 and 3. So, you're talking about, that's how great this fight was. 3 judges with 3 scorecards, and I don't think any of them were one that you looked at and you think, what are you looking at? Even though there was a card like that earlier in the night. But in this particular fight, you didn't see that.
I love to see what they did, by the way. Good job, Western Australia Athletic Commission. Good job. Yep. So now we're into round number 4, and Izzy says something very interesting to his corner. He says, I heard him.
Mm-hmm.
And Dricus's disposition in between 3 and 4 was the same as it was between 1 and 2. He looked freaking exhausted. But he
resting exhaustion face.
Right? Resting exhaustion face. But if you notice, and I took account of this, Izzy stands up, which I think perception-wise being like, he's fine. Dricus sits down.
Right.
Did you notice that Dricus stands up halfway through the round? Halfway through he stands
I didn't pick up on that.
Yes. Every round.
Psychological response?
He would, no, I just think that's part of it. He's like, okay, sit down, get my breathing, have him put the ice on my neck, get me the water. What do I need to know now? Then he stands up with probably 20 seconds left in the resting period. And that showed me that he was still okay. He did the same thing in between 1 and 2 as he did in between 3 and 4. He stood up with about 20 seconds left.
Sharp observation, and honestly, probably a really good practice to have for anybody, right? Because if you're coming off the stool as they're telling you to get ready, are you really back focused? Or are you then going to need that first 15 to 20 to 25 seconds of the round to really get the mind and the body flowing again, man? Great observation and a great practice by DDP.
Yeah. So I noticed that, and but when you hear the announcers tell you so much that he's exhausted, I almost believed that he was exhausted in the round, like going into it, because he had resting exhaustion face. Izzy was standing up, but I noticed that Izzy was tired too.
Yeah,
I do think Izzy was really tired going into round number 4, because in round number 4, I believe DDP then stepped on the gas a little bit.
Yep. Definitely. And I think that's what we saw in the exchanges when Adesanya was finally hurt. And to your point, the way he reacted to those exchanges, that's just completely out of character for Adesanya. The way he kind of turned his back and covered. That is the opposite of Israel Adesanya. That is the opposite of the slickness, of the escapability, of the master of distance and movement. And, you know, whether that's fatigue, whether it's just the power of DDP, that's ultimately what led to the downfall, was a critical mistake in the way he reacted to that.
So, but I think it goes, let's take one more step back from it, because I think it goes one more step back. And I noticed when they were both standing at range, a lot of times DDP is going backwards from the standpoint of when he was going backwards, not that he was tired or not that he was scared of the shots coming on him or any of that. What he's doing is he was slightly keeping Izzy out of range the entire time. And Izzy, as we said, is masterful at range and distance. And he did this in round number 1, round number 2, round number 3, and he did it in round number 4, and it paid huge dividends, in my opinion, in round number 4. Because Izzy's lunging with these punches a little bit, lunging, and then you can time that explosion back. And that's what Dricus did. He timed these explosions back at the precise time that he needed to hit these explosions. And there was a glancing blow off the top that I don't think a lot of people recognize as the shot that hurt Izzy. But to me, it was the shot that hurt Izzy. So when he's exploding in round number 2, when Izzy wasn't tired, he's not turning away. He's like, bam, I accepted it. I'm going to get back into my stance.
Yep.
Now we're a little bit tired in round number 4, and Dricus was employing the same exact game plan in round number 4 as he was in round number 1. Walking backwards, staying out of range, seeing the opening to explode. And yeah, the explosion wasn't the same all the time. Sometimes he would jump in with a left hook. Sometimes he would jump in with a jab. Sometimes he would jump in with an overhand, but it was still a rinse and repeat cycle at that point.
You know, as you're talking about that, I could the words of Conor McGregor came to my head. Timing beats speed, right? I mean, you're DDP, you're not as fast as Israel Adesanya, period. You're just not. But if you can make sure that you're just out of range as he leaps forward, and then you can time that counter in just the right spot and in just the right distance, you can be effective in it, right? And so I think he was managing that distance well, you know, obviously not to the level of Adesanya, but in a way that was incredibly effective for him. And you're exactly right. The fatigue at that point from Israel Adesanya, I think it was exactly why he reacted the way he did. And as I said, ultimately led to his downfall.
And then when that range gets to where Izzy wants the range, that high guard is so high. And a lot of people are thinking that when he's bringing his leg up and putting his head down, that's a sign of fatigue. That's just a sign of his defense, albeit probably not, albeit it is not the most technically proficient way to do it.
Right.
But I don't think anything we can say about DDP is the most technically balanced, proficient way to do it. But I've seen him do that in all of his fights. That had nothing to do with fatigue. It didn't have anything to do with him being hurt. It's just what he does. So when that range closed, he balls himself. It's
a slightly different version of what Sean Strickland does. It's just not. It's not a Philly shell where he's doing this and he's rolling. It's like the South African ball. You know what I mean? Like
South African ball.
Yeah, it's not a Philly shell. It's a South African ball. You know, he just kind of balls up and he lifts the lead leg like a tie striker would do to defense. So you're absolutely right about that.
And then when Izzy gets done throwing his combination, DDP would get his range back to where he wanted it, make that explosion, and then that led to ultimately the end of the fight. And Dricus comes in, misses a couple, then keeps that blitz on because he sees Izzy start turning, keeps that blitz on. Then he hurts Izzy. I think he hit him on top of the head. It hurt Izzy. And then I don't know if this is pride at this point, but Izzy points to the ground. So right here.
That was interesting too as well. When I was watching it live, I thought at first he was trying to say that you stepped on my lead foot, and that's why I stumbled. But maybe everybody else seemed to say no. He's literally pointing. He's doing the Max Holloway. Let's throw down right here. And if so, yeah, that wasn't necessarily what you want to do. That wasn't necessarily the way. And that could be another sign of fatigue. Like, hey, I don't have the energy to keep running and moving and ducking, and like let's just throw.
I think it was more of like, no, that wasn't anything. If you want to go, we can go. I think that's what I thought. And so I thought he was actually like, that wasn't anything, like you stepped on my foot. Because obviously when you have those opposite stance exchanges that they both have multiple times, that does happen sometimes. Like people get their lead foot stepped on and they stumble a little bit. I thought that's what he was saying. But either way, it was
it was not great timing.
Because from there, and this is where I think DDP is a smart fighter. Usually when that happens, they acknowledge, okay, let's go. If that's what Israel's doing, I think that's the way Dricus took it though. He goes like this. Dricus didn't wait for anybody to settle in. Usually when that happens, they acknowledge, they both sit down, and then they start going. He went like this, and Dricus just goes. Which is
smart, right? If you're inviting me in, if you're inviting me in, I don't have to say, sir, I accept your invitation, and I will now walk in.
And you're against the fence, and I'm in the open space.
That's it. Yeah, right? That's what was weird about it. That's why I didn't take it as throw down, because why would you ever say, let's throw down if your back is against the fence and you have less escape routes?
Yeah, but then Dricus hits him with 2 pretty big shots, and Izzy did the thing. He turned almost 180 degrees, right? Or actually 90 degrees, showed his back. Right. And this is how I knew Izzy was hurt. Dricus didn't even take him down. He just dragged him to the ground.
Yep. Absolutely. Just drug him down. Didn't even have to shoot. And hooks in immediately. Right. I mean, which just goes to show on those exchanges why we thought DDP was so effective in those transitions, right? Because for his size, how big and strong he is, he does move very slick in those grappling exchanges.
Yeah. Jumps right on the back, one choke or one hook, pulls him to his back, and he didn't even attempt to rear naked choke him. He went straight to the short choke, or whatever you want to call it, hit the crowbar, hiding the elbow behind, gable gripping, and Izzy's face was down. And I think they called it on the broadcast a rear naked choke. I think, but it was a face crank. It was a face crank choke.
Yeah, ultimately goes in the books as a rear naked choke according to the commission as well. But yeah, it didn't look like it was under the neck to me. It's a face crank. And again, now you talked about exactly why the grip was effective and the technique was effective. But as I mentioned in round 2, where I felt like Adesanya really wasn't defensively responsible in that position and fighting the arms, I didn't see that he really made a spot at trying to get 2-on-1 escape. You know the escape routine. I didn't see that it was necessarily there either. And that allowed DDP to get what was a rather quick submission in the position.
Right. And if anybody doesn't know, when your chin's down and there's so much pressure in there, ask Conor McGregor how much pressure there is when somebody is able to hide that elbow with the gable grip and do the short choke there, which is really just so much damn pressure on your chin. It feels like it's going to break. And their only way to do is to relieve pressure up to, guess what? Get choked.
Then you get the choke. And it's funny too, because I think sometimes when people say it wasn't even under the neck, I think sometimes people look at that as like, oh, that was a sign of weakness that you tapped that. No. That hurts like hell. You know what I mean? It hurts worse than the actual. You'd be better off just getting choked. That hurts way less. You know what I mean? So I think sometimes when people go, I can't believe he tapped to that, it wasn't even under the chin. You got to understand that's actually more painful than it being on your neck.
Yeah. And a lot of times people think like the squeeze, like you're not using as much squeeze because your elbow or your forearm across his shoulder blade in the back is the anchor point. So it's not like you're having to like you would with a rear naked choke, or you would with like a triangle choke with your legs. You have that anchor point. And so now it's just, I'm just going to suck everything to me. Right. And it gets so much dang tighter. And like I said, the only way to go, even if you could at that point, is to elevate your chin, which most of the time you can't because there's so much pressure.
Yeah. And you can't even slide the chin fast.
Yeah. So just an amazing fight. Both fighters, in my opinion, looked spectacular. And I know we have been singing a lot more DDP's praises in this, but Izzy had it wasn't Izzy had moments. Izzy had, in my opinion, half the round in every round. It's just Dricus did a little more in those rounds that I gave it to him.
I agree. I thought Adesanya looked good. I actually watched the post-fight show afterwards. I was a little bit surprised. Dean Thomas, who I have a ton of respect for as an analyst, said he thought Adesanya didn't look good. I disagreed, man. I thought he really did look good, man. I thought that he still has a lot to give this game. He's still one of the elite fighters in the sport. There's no question. I mean, his past accomplishments, you don't have to discuss those. They're incredible. But I think he's still capable of competing with the best of the game. I thought he had moments. This was just a well-matched fight, an incredible performance from both guys. And Du Plessis, man, I don't think you can deny this guy anymore, man. I mean, when you talk about where this man stands in sport, I get it. Everybody wants to degrade the guy for his style, for his, fatigue, whatever it may be.
It's really because the guy's a damn tank. He's a good-looking dude. He's got everything in the world, and we need to find a way to bring him down a little bit.
I'm telling you that people don't want to accept it, man. But listen, this guy now has consecutive victories of the number 1, number 2, and number 3 ranked contenders in the division. Nobody else in any weight class has that right now, where they've beaten 1, 2, and 3.
Sean Strickland, Israel Adesanya.
In consecutive fights.
Sanity.
I'll be very anxious to see the updated pound for pound rankings come out this week, because again, I think people are a little slow to give DDP his respect, but nobody else in the game has that right now. Nobody else has consecutive victories. No UFC champion has consecutive victories over number 1, 2, and 3 in the division. Undefeated in the UFC, 22-2 in his career. I think 20 finishes along the way. It's time to stop doubting the guy, man. It's time to start giving him his respect.
Yeah, a huge show of respect after the fight. Dricus obviously is the first on the mic, and we did a lot of technical analysis, so I won't bore you with his technical analysis for the fight. Mimics what we said though. But then he says, "Hey, I've nothing but respect for Israel. What he did for this game, it can't be measured, and I'm sorry that you took it that way. It was not in my intention," which leads credence to what I said a couple weeks ago.
I think you were spot on with that. I thought the same thing. First of all, I love to see the two guys come together afterwards and show the respect. And that's one of the things I love about this sport so much, is you earn the respect of that other individual no matter what when you go in there and you have war with each other like that. But I did think exactly what you were saying. It's like he originally said it, didn't necessarily mean for it to be taken the way it was, but then said, well, if that's the way they're going to take it and it gets me the fight, oh, well, let's go with it. You know what I mean? And I think you're right. It's just like, we're just going to keep trolling and we're going to go with it. So I thought you were right on with that.
And huge class from Izzy. Izzy is always class in defeat. Always. Yes. Always. Yes. And I will tell you, I was a little worried when I saw him taking off the gloves. Were you?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit as well, because and we can it kind of leads into what's next for Israel Adesanya, right? Because you start thinking about it, what is next for Israel Adesanya, right? And so when he took off the gloves, I thought he's probably thinking the same thing. Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to drop back down and beat some lower ranked contenders in a co-main event on a pay-per-view and try to get myself back to a title? That just doesn't seem to be like something that would fight, yeah, that doesn't entice him, right? I mean, this guy's been at the top of the game, seemingly made a ton of money along the way, is certainly a global superstar, has proven everything. And let's not forget, by the way, not only does he have his time in the UFC, but his body has been through a very extensive career as a kickboxer as well, mentally, physically, what that does to you, all those years of training and competition. So it did concern me a little bit, but when he says, I'm not done, I'll be back, I believe him. I believe him. And I'll tell you what.
We know what's in line for Dricus right now. It's going to be Sean Strickland. After that, maybe 205, maybe Pereira comes down. I don't know. Maybe if he can get by Sean Strickland. We know the path for Dricus. The only path right here, the only big fight, I don't want to see Whitaker 3. Right?
Right.
It'd be a great fight, but it does nothing for either person. Okay. The only fight to make is if Dricus beats Strickland, then let's get an Izzy, Sean Strickland. That could main event a pay-per-view still.
So here's me, and it's funny you say that, because to me, the fight to make right now is Israel Adesanya versus Sean Strickland. I know Sean doesn't feel that way, so that's the problem, right? Now, we saw that interview that Dana White did where he said, oh, Sean Strickland's number 1. He's next. I will say last week's Dana White Contender Series, I believe it was Alex Buchanan asked him about that in the post-fight. And Dana did say, well, what I said was he's the number 1 contender right now. We do have Robert Whitaker, Khamzat Chimaev coming up as well. So maybe it's not 100% set in stone. I think Sean Strickland believes it's set in stone. I don't know how you're going to get Sean Strickland to agree to a fight. I know, that's what I'm saying. I don't know how you're going to get him to agree to a fight with Israel Adesanya. So that may be the problem. But that, to me, if there weren't those, if it was just video game matchmaking and we can put anybody together we want to put against each other, that to me is the fight to make right now because of the history, because of the meaning between those two. That's the one I'd like to see. Otherwise, yeah, I think Izzy's sitting out for a little while because I think he's got to see what happens with Whitaker, Chimaev. Because you start looking at the rankings right now. No disrespect to any of these names, but just
really quick though, really quick.
Yeah.
No disrespect to any names. in the UFC, in no way, shape, or form would they put him up against Shemaya if Shemaya were to beat Whitaker. I don't ever see that being a scenario in any way, shape, or form.
Tough stylistic matchup.
Yeah, they're not going to do that to Izzy.
Yeah,
and they're
I
not
agree.
going to get Shemaya if he can get by this either. They're not going to take a risk either way.
No, if Shemaya beats Whitaker, he's fighting for a title, right? I mean, they're going to make that happen. So if he wins, I mean, it all depends on schedule too. Where can he fly to? Where can he get to? Et cetera, et cetera. But what I was gonna say, it's hard. You start looking at the names. All right, 1 Strickland, 2 Adesanya, 3 Whitaker, 4 Nasruddin Imava, 5 Jared Cannonier, 6 Marvin Vettori, 7 Brendan Allen, 8 Paulo Costa, 9 Jack Hermanson, 10 Roman Dolidze. So now I've all the way gone down to number 10, and I've named off guys that either A, Adesanya has already beaten, or B, guys that don't necessarily have that recognition level to attract his attention as a superstar. And so I think realistically, the only name that I see right now is Sean Strickland.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of looking at path forward, I'm much like, and Sean Strickland ain't going to take that fight. And only after he had his title shot.
Exactly. Yeah, and then maybe that's what Adesanya says. Well, let me sit back and let's let this title fight play out, and maybe it makes a whole lot of sense for me to step right back in a title fight because of the history. I mean, those two guys can certainly sell it, right? And what do we say all the time, man? I mean, obviously wins and losses and rankings and all that stuff matters, but entertainment matters, and what people want to see matters. What people are willing to plop down and for that pay-per-view matters. So maybe that's the play right now, because I really, just to me, the only fight that I see that makes sense right now for Adesanya is that fight right there with Sean Strickland. And Sean's not going to take it right now, as you said. So maybe you just got to sit tight, buckle up, and hang tight for a little bit.
All right. There's too much to go. What we took, 40 something minutes just on this main event.
It was an amazing fight.
Amazing fight. Just from the main card, let's not even get into the undercard. Actually, I do want to talk just one person really quick. Carlos Prates.
Right. Oh, yes.
Dude, amazing. That guy is going to be a problem in the world.
He is a problem. Yeah, he is a problem. That long, lanky frame that he's got, the striking ability that he has. The man's got a personality. He likes to smoke cigarettes. I mean, not what I would advise for a high-level athlete, but that's his thing. So he's got like a little story to sell as well. I mean, he's a superstar in the making. But, I mean, if we're talking main card, we just have to talk about Dan Hooker and Mateusz Gamrot real quick, right? I mean,
that's what I was saying.
Again,
what want to talk about?
Fight. I mean, fight. That's a fight of the year. I mean, Dricus Du Plessis is Israel Adesanya is a fight of the year candidate to me. Dan Hooker, Mateusz Gamrot is a fight of the year candidate for me. A fight that it was incredibly tough to score. That I have no issue with that fight going either way. I struggled with it myself, to be honest with you. I originally thought Mateusz Gamrot have come back, and now I see the case for Dan Hooker as well. I think it's one of those fights where I could honestly go either way on the score. But Dan Hooker provided us with one of the greatest moments in UFC history on the stool. You know what I mean?
I love this shit.
I mean, yes, as he's like, getting, is cuts being tended to. There's ice on his head. They're trying to give him advice going into round 3. And he's like, boys, I love this shit. I mean, that's what we want to see, man. That's a fighter's fighter that will go out there and compete against anybody. It was just phenomenal, man. Again, I think that should be on some fight of the year lists at the end of the year.
That was just an amazing fight. Gamrot thought, based off the reaction, thought he did enough to win. I see the case for him. I don't want to listen. Nobody lost. Somebody obviously lost at number 5
right.
ranking. Definitely, Gamrot had something on the horizon if he got by this fight. But Dan Hooker, this dude, and now he's tatted up like some freaking just war machine. And in between rounds, as he's cut over his eye, under his eye, he's busted up, he's bleeding everywhere. He's like, I love this shit. Yeah, and Dan Hooker, I've always been a fan. I'll tune into any fight you're in now. 100%. And here's the thing: going against a grappling heavy opponent, one who, honestly, I'll be honest, I thought Gamrot won.
I had Gamrot 2 and 3. I went back and watched it. I can see Hooker. I think it's Hooker 1, Gamrot 2, and then it comes down to how you have 3.
Right. I don't remember the rounds per se, but going back, I like those elbows on the takedown attempts. A lot of people put stock in the guillotine attempts. Those were never going to be finished. All they were is to change position. but the elbows were brutal. Those were brutal. Like, Gamrot is going to be feeling those for a couple weeks.
The elbows were nice. And again, we talk about things that you can take from fighters. Hooker's ability to sprawl even on the second attempt, right? Like, ideally when you drill in practice, your partner shoots from range and you sprawl back. But his ability to sprawl back and get the hips clear, even when Gamrot's got his hands around his waist or around his body, to break that grip and continue to just not accept that. And I'm going to get my legs behind me and I'm going to get my hips down. He did that on a couple of occasions where I was just like, that is gorgeous to watch, man. That to not accept that position, to be like, I refuse to go to my back because I know if I go to my back, floor is lava. I'm losing to you at that point. We're not doing that. It was gorgeous to watch. And I thought, look, as you said, nobody lost. I think, as you said, you're right, he lost that position. But I think Gamrot had been, criticized a little bit for maybe not being the most exciting fighter in the division. But this was such an incredible fight that I think Dan Hooker helped raise Mateusz Gamrot's stock a little bit too, where you're going to want to tune in and see what Gamrot does next time.
And his striking looked great in it, and we hadn't seen a lot of striking out of him. But I think ultimately, now that I think back about it, the differences in these fights because I think statistics will say that Gamrot probably outstruck Hooker a little bit, right? But the pressure was so much, and it's hard to say standing strikes as opposed because those elbows are going to be counted as significant strikes. So I don't know how that really breaks down, but the damage of those elbows, I think, is what ultimately won Dan Hooker this fight, because he did it in round 2 and 3 viciously.
Yep, I would agree. And Gamrot more strikes in round 1, that even Hooker more in round 2, even though I had the results the other way around. Yeah, it was just, and then they were both like dead even in round 3. But as you said, it was those elbows that were nasty. So. Great fight, man. It was a great fight. Again, I think that's a fight of the year contender.
Yeah, man. So, anything else you want to talk about before we get off? It's like I'm almost exhausted talking about this fight.
I guess just briefly, you touched on that one weird scorecard, and you were, Jairzinho Rosenstruck, Tai Tuivasa. That 30-27 score for Tai Tuivasa. I think Tai was even a little bit surprised to hear that. And, again, I hate to just put guys on blast or whatever, because we know, you're a licensed official. You know how much these officials are really trying to get this thing right. But the truth is there was no defense for it. Howie Booth got that one wrong. It was not 30-27 tied to Tuivasa. I'm not sure how he reached that score. But as you said, kudos to the commission for saying, hey, man, that score is unacceptable. We can't have you working the rest of the night. Take the rest of the evening off.
Anyways, I lost connection there for a second. Sorry, everybody. I caught the very end of what you're saying. Yes, and we'll just go there because I didn't catch most of it. But hey, oh no, the 30-27. There we go.
Yep.
It was outrageous.
Yep.
And they did what was supposed to be done. I like to see it happen more. And good for the Western Australian Athletic Commission. Good for them.
Yeah. I agree. Like I said, I hate to criticize officials too much. I know they're trying to do their best, but that was unacceptable. And we all make mistakes. But like you said, if you make a mistake, we don't need to necessarily put you out there the rest of the night.
And here's why I love Nevada, right? I don't see them doing that in Nevada, but they have the best judges in Nevada. They bring on the just best judges from around the country to, even for contender series, even for fight nights, even for pay-per-views, not just the big ones. They do it for all of them. But every time, and I don't see this in other jurisdictions, and I've made suggestions in different commissions that I go there. Well, what do you think? And I'm like, well, I think you need to do this. I think you need to hear explanation. I think you need to hear why I think this judge is an idiot. I think they need to explain it to you. Can they articulate it? That's the great thing about Nevada. Executive Director Jeff Mullen will hold you accountable in the moment. Hey guys, everybody, let's go talk.
Yep.
If you can explain yourself after every fight, if you can explain yourself articulately on why, I may agree or disagree, but at least you can explain it why that would fit XYZ criteria. And nothing that happened with this guy in 30-27, and no commissions do this. Like literally, Nevada, out of the ones that I've worked, Nevada's the only one that will hold people accountable in the moment. It's very hard at the end of the night, 4 hours later, to articulate what happened in that fight.
I agree, and I love that practice as well. And I think it's one more commissions should look at doing as well, because you said you can have a debriefing at the end of the night, but we all know these are long nights and it's hard to remember. But when you can just get everybody, because even if you have those same 3 officials sitting in the chair for the next fight, they've still got a few minutes as those fighters exit the cage, the next fighters come in, the introductions are done. You've got a couple of minutes that you can talk. I love exactly what you said. What Jeff Mullen does with Nevada Commission, I think should really be the standard because it lets you just have that ongoing evaluation throughout the night.
Yep. All right. I do just got to really quick. I want to touch on what is it? August 24th. What is that? This coming weekend. Apex. Right. I think now listen, the card's nothing to sneeze at. Or it's nothing I'm not even going to go through any of the card, right?
Okay.
But this main event.
Okay.
Jared Cannonier, Brahilio.
Yep.
This fight could make a new star.
Yes, 100%. I'm glad you're right. The card as a whole, there's going to be some good fights on it, but it's not going to be one we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. But both leading in and coming out of it, Jared Cannonier, Kyle Bahio, man, these dudes are. I mean, Kyle is a guy on the rise, but we know Jared Cannonier is an absolute stud. So this is going to be a big measuring stick. This fight
can create a new potential contender in this division, and he's fighting out of those fighting nerds. These dudes are coming. This team is coming.
Nominated
for. You heard it here first.
Listen, man, they were nominated for Gym of the Year in the World MMA Awards, man. I think it just shows respect to how much they're doing, how much noise they're making. I mean, your American top teams, your Extreme Coutures, I mean, your AKAs, they're always going to be nominated, right? Because they just have such a great roster of fighters. But when you're seeing respect like this given to a team like the Fighting Nerds, I think it just shows what studs they have on that roster and what waves they've been able to make in a relatively short period of time.
Yep. Awesome team. Well, that was a great episode. We got about 2 minutes of other stuff in, but we talked 40 something minutes of DDP, Israel and Adesanya, and the guys deserve it, man. That was a hell of a fight, hell of a card, hell of a crowd. I don't know how they do it at 6 a.m, but hey, good on them.
It's amazing, man. Yeah, that fight was MMA at its highest level. I guess the last thing, just real quick, I'll give a shout. Walter Walker and Junior Tafa, no controversy. You scream out in the middle of a submission, that's a verbal submission every single time. It seemed like there was a little confusion on the broadcast, maybe that Tafa got done wrong or whatever. And not for 1 second did I think that was a controversial stoppage in the least. If you're locked up in a leg lock like that and you scream out in pain, it's going to be stopped 100% of the time. My recommendation, though, is they do a rematch. I put that on Twitter. Some people didn't like the idea. They're like, why do I want to see that fight again? I'm like, well, you got two guys that nobody else. I mean, who else are you going to put them against right now? Now you got history, right? Now we're looking at the pro wrestling side of things. Now we got an angle to work. Let's bring it back in there. They're slapping each other after the fight's over. So anyway, just wanted to mention that one. It's clearly stated in the Unified Rules of Mixed Martial Arts. The type of submission, a scream in pain is a verbal submission. You don't have to say tap, tap, tap. You don't have to say stop, stop, stop. You have to go, as a submission is being locked in. Now, listen, if you get hit in the face and you go, that's not a submission, right? But an active submission was being put on, and one that has probably tore every single ligament in Tafa's leg as well. Right. Let's just be honest. Yep, 100%. So if you want that rematch, it's probably going to be a while, Mr. Morgan. he might be healing up for a little bit. So there you go. All right, listen, hey, I'll be at PFL this weekend. So everybody, there is PFL San Diego? On Friday night. Washington, D.C., actually. So I'm going to head out to the East Coast. PFL MMA, great main event there. Brendan Loughnane and Kai Kamaka will be a fun main event. I'll also be cheering on Jose Perez, the former CFFC featherweight champion. He's fighting this week? Yep, he's fighting. Is he on the main card or is he on the undercard? He's on the prelims. He's on the undercard. So tune in early on ESPN Plus to check out the former CFFC champ. I'm excited to be in the building for that one for him. So and then I'll be back. I'll fly back on Saturday and be there for the UFC event in the Apex. So a busy weekend. How about you? What do I got this? I think this weekend is finally a decompression weekend for me. But then I fly out on Monday to Vegas. I don't know. You want to get a cold drink on Monday night? Next Monday night. I could be talked into that. All right, because then Contenders, I'll be working Contender Series that following Tuesday. So Monday. I'll see you Monday night. Yeah, there we go. Awesome. Pick me up from the Holiday Inn Express or wherever I'm from. Done. Count it. All righty, man. Well, good stuff. For John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. Enjoy the fights.